I am so excited to talk to everyone today. It really is an absolute pleasure and honor to discuss one of my heroes, right? One of my heroes of academia, one of my heroes of fiction, and one of my heroes of faith. A man that is very deep into his faith, and we'll see how that impacted his writing and his life in general. What we would call C.S. Lewis is a polymath, which means that he is very talented and knowledgeable in more than one topic, which we will see that he wrote. He was a prolific writer, which means he wrote very, very. Okay, David, I see that you said there's no voice. Can anyone else have a problem hearing me? Can you hear me? Okay, I don't see anyone saying it either, so maybe the computer is okay. Okay, let me share my screen with you. Okay, let's go back to the top. Okay, so C.S. Lewis, as you can see here, was born in the 19th century or the 1800s, right at the end, what we say the turn of the century. He was born in November 29th. We just missed his birthday. And right around this time, the country was going through a lot of change. In 1898, the country was experiencing a cult, not excuse me, an industrial revolution. Right, we were going away from agriculture, where people usually lived on farms and made their money through growing plants and vegetables, into a time where we were making money off of what is the word I'm looking for? Off of creating things, off of making things, whether it be clothing, right? Clothing with cotton and things like that, or even steel and metal and things like that. Something that China has experienced at a more wider time frame, that the United Kingdom and the United States went through really quickly. So this will affect his life. This will have a lot to do with um, his writings and the things that he did. And then obviously November 22nd, 1963. I don't know if anyone knows that date, but that's also a very important date for more than C.S. Lewis's death. That is the same. C.S. Lewis died the same day that John F. Kennedy, the American president, was assassinated and killed. So we didn't hear about it very much because obviously our president was killed and we didn't hear about the death of such a great man, C.S. Lewis. Um, he was born in what was then Ireland. Today it's called Northern Ireland. For anyone that is confused about how the United Kingdom is organized, it can be difficult because many don't know, even many Americans don't know that for many years Ireland was by itself a different country. And then when when England took over Ireland, it maintained a lot of control until um, the uh, the Irish people wanted to be independent, and then there was just a small part of Ireland called Northern Ireland that remained in the control of England. And so that is the situation that C.S. Lewis was born into. He was born into a country with a little bit of um, it was a difficult time for the country. It was a time of growing, a time of confusion, a time where people weren't sure if they were British or if they were Irish, or if they were English. These are real things that people experienced in C.S. Lewis's early childhood, and so he grew up with that. And we'll see that as he writes, as he develops and creates his literature, that these experiences will impact his writing. Okay, a couple of just quick things about his childhood. This is a picture of C.S. Lewis as a child. CS stands for Clive Staples. Now, that was the name that his parents gave him, but he preferred to be called Jack. Now, I tried to find out why he preferred Jack, or why he was even called Jack. It's unclear. I don't know, other than when you are a child, many times adults may use a what we call a nickname to call you. I'm sure same thing all over the world, right? When you're a child, people call you by different names. And I think at the time in the United Kingdom, Jack was something that you would call a young kid, and he liked it. He wanted to keep it as he grew older. Now, that is your teacher's assumption. I don't know this for fact, but I do think that's a pretty good guess. He did have an older brother named Warren. We don't know much about, I mean, we know about Warren, but he doesn't really speak much about him. But from what I understand, they had a good relationship. Uh, CS's mother, he passed away when he was only 10 years old. And so that's a hard time to lose a family member, especially a mother. So that is obviously something that is very sad. And again, in his writings, you will see a lot of times the mother doesn't survive. And it's sad, but it's also because of his background and his life that he experienced, and obviously it affects the way he writes his own characters in his stories. Uh, a month later, he and his brother were sent to a boarding school. So a boarding school, you guys know what a boarding school is because many of you attend a boarding school. This is a school where you go and live there, and you're not going home every day after school. You're just going to your dorm or your whatever apartment or flat or whatever you have there. Um, not many American students do this. This is something that's much more popular in China. It's more popular in the United Kingdom, but it just doesn't happen very much here in the United States. I think there are some cultural reasons why that doesn't happen, but it's also the big reason is we don't necessarily have to do it that way for many reasons, because of the fact that a lot of times work and parents and all of that don't need that much care for the kids, but some parents do. Some parents work really hard, have very important jobs, and they just need a little support, uh, throughout the week. Now, C.S. Lewis did not like school. Now, if you're hearing this and you do not like school, do not think that you're not going to be successful. Okay. Some people just will never like formal education. Sometimes it's tough. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that some people just won't always enjoy it. That doesn't mean they're not smart. And it certainly doesn't mean they're not capable of being successful. Now, he did hate the boarding school that he went to, but fortunately, he was only there for a couple of years after the school, and then the school closed. A year later, he went back to England, but this time he loved it. So he went to, remember, he was born in Ireland, and then he went to study in England. He came back home for just a little while, and then went back, and he loved the new school that he went to. Now, he learned to love poetry and developed an interest in modern language, mastering French, German, and Italian. So I tell this joke all the time because I think it's hilarious and I think it's true. They say if you speak three languages, you are trilingual. If you speak two languages, you are bilingual. If you speak one language, you are American because Americans are one of the few people in the world that only speak usually one language. Now, I have lots of friends who can speak other languages. I can stumble my way through a menu in China and order food very poorly with very bad pronunciation. But for the most part, we only can speak one language here in the United States. So, oh, too far. But C.S. Lewis, as you could see, can speak 4 languages. That's amazing. And I do see some of you can speak other languages as well. And that's incredible for you to be sitting there in China listening to all English. Your teacher's trying very hard to make it easy enough to understand. And I need you. You should know that that is already amazing and a really incredible ability to be able to understand different languages. Now, your teacher does understand different cultures very well. And so that is what is very important to me. Obviously, language and culture are like really important to each other, but your teacher prefers to learn culture. One of my best and the most rewarding things that I did when I was living in China in Xi'an was learn all of the dynasties and to learn more about the dynasties and the people in Chinese history that were impactful because that helped me relate to my students. And the C.S. Lewis also was a very talented study of culture, and he understood the culture of multiple places. Now, for many of us, when we think Ireland and England, we don't think very different cultures, but there were some big differences. And C.S. Lewis, as a young child, had to learn that, had to understand that all cultures are not the same. I mean, even if you go to a friend's house, you will see that their home culture is different than your home culture at your house. And so those little things are important to your teacher and obviously important to C.S. Lewis as he is writing about different cultures and different places. Now, in 1916, at 18 years old, he was accepted to Oxford University in England. Now, I'm sure most of us have heard of Oxford University. This is a place that your teacher would love to go take just a few classes. I don't think that I quite have what it takes to finish a master's or a PhD there, although I would very much want to try. This is a great school that the world is knows about. I mean, I think everybody that cares about education knows about this school. Arguably one of the best. It is the we have schools like Harvard and Yale here in the United States that are famous around the world. But much of their what made them great is the fact that they were doing what Oxford does and trying to be as good as Oxford is. So this is a great accomplishment for CS. Great, or we'll say Jack, since he likes Jack. This was a great accomplishment for Jack. He, as you know, didn't always like school. So for a young child to grow up who didn't like school and then finally get accepted to Oxford is huge. And remember, this is not something that he got because of his parents. This was something he earned. His mother was dead. We don't know a lot about his father. I know that if you go back and do a little bit more research, you can find some things about his dad, but we don't know a lot. So for him to do that is a big deal. Now things changed very quickly for Jack because of World War I. This is one of the most important times of his life. One of the things that really affect his education. I mean, excuse me, not his. Well, yeah, his education on how to be a human. But it really affected his writing and the things and his books. And we'll talk about his books and the Chronicles of Narnia in a little bit. But and others, many right. He's written so many things, but a lot of his experience in World War I has affected his writing, and we'll see that. But basically, he goes to World War One. He is surrounded around a lot of really great men as well while he's fighting in World War One. He fought, where he fought was in northern France, which was the Western Front, and so that was a awful place to be. Just mud. You see in this picture here, the mud and the very, very, just a very unpleasant and not a very fun environment to be in, while you're also trying to just survive and not be killed by the enemy. Um, Now, once he left the army, once he left his service as a soldier, he went back to Oxford to finish. So now you have a young man who um, came in, obviously very has already experienced a lot of life as a child, lost his mother, and then he goes to war, and then he gains all of that, whatever, impact that has on his life. And now he's back at Oxford and ready to continue his education. So while no one likes war and no one supports the killing of soldiers, or no one wants people to have to die at war, it does have an effect on people, and for those survivors it can be used as um a really good way to further your life and um to make an impact on your life. So that's what he brings back to school with him, that experience. Um, so after the war in 1918, he returns to Oxford. In 1925, he graduates. So if you can see that, it looks kind of like your teacher's experience in college. 1918 to 1925, that's 7 years to go to college. And so I know many of you know it usually takes about 4 years to graduate from college. But myself as well, took me a little while because I changed my major so much. I was interested in lots of different things, and I'm glad that I was able to do that, because I was able to learn a lot of extra things in college. But his focus was in philosophy and ancient history. Um, Not enough is said, in my opinion, about C.S. Lewis's philosophy. He does have some really pretty basic philosophy books that you could read. Much of them are about his faith and his commitment to Christianity. But I don't think enough is said about what he is able, how he writes about philosophy. It's very, very well done. Um, and then ancient history. Actually, you know what? C.S. Lewis is mainly known, as far as academia is concerned, for his ancient history, writing about it and writing about the literature of that day, Greek and Latin literature, English literature. That is what he taught when he teaches. And so he does have all these books, but as a teacher, this is what he focuses on in his writings. And so he did teach English for 29 years before becoming a professor of medieval and Renaissance literature in 1955. So he taught for 30 years almost, just in just basic, not basic English, because he was teaching at Oxford. It was very, very high level English. But then he, became an expert, or was an expert in medieval and Renaissance. So medieval and Renaissance time period is, I would say, and this is me just kind of guessing, probably around the 1500s to the 1800s, something like that. And so just the literature and the things that happened in the world at that time, which were a lot of things happened at that point. And so this is just a lot of stuff for him to have taught and to understand. And again, with the languages, he had to learn many different languages. There is a famous home in the United Kingdom called the Kilns. This is where he had the first idea to write a children's book in 1939. Okay, so 1939, he is about 40 years old. So if you think about it, he started writing children's books, which is what he is most popularly known for, when he was 40. So if you are thinking what, you're worried about, even to the parents that might be listening, you could do anything at any age. That's pretty incredible. Um, children were evacuated from England's major cities for fear of bombing. Okay, so this is an interesting thing to remember, because if you remember, if you've read, or if you've even seen some of the movies of the Narnia series, that is the reason why the children are where they are. It's because of the bombings in England's major cities like London. And so a lot of people would take their children and send them to the countryside to live away from the cities. And so this is something that had an impact on his life. He saw that during the war, World War II as well. And so this is what is the precursor or the beginning of a lot of one of his stories, which is probably the most famous one. And so Lewis opened his home to some of the children, one of whom were fascinated with the wardrobe there, immediately imagining there was another way through to the other side. Now, if you're familiar with any of his writing, the beginning of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the children discover a large wardrobe, and in the back of the wardrobe there is like a opening, a portal, what we would say a portal to a different time. You can walk through it and you're in a different land. Okay, that is where Narnia is for these children that are a part of it. And so hopefully, if we have time, if teacher doesn't talk too long, we can watch a little bit of clips of some of the most important scenes in the Narnia series. But yeah, C.S. Lewis, this is his most famous book. This is the book we'll talk a lot about. This is the book we will read in my winter program as well. This is a really great book, and it's also a great book not only for learning English, it's a great book for learning proper English and how to speak well. But it's just a really great fantasy book about, an amazing story of kids who experiencing extra big, large, amazing events in their life, and a little about how they are escaping the real world to do this. Um, so he completed this story in 1948. So he's almost 50 years old now when he completes this story. Actually, I think this would have been, he would have just turned 50 when this came out. He went on to write 6 more Narnia books, but not really in the order they're supposed to be read. So he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then later on he wrote a different book that happened before The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The Magician's Nephew tells us of, and we'll talk more about what each book is about really quickly here in a little bit. But that tells of the creation of Narnia and set stage for the events that was written next to last and published in 1956. So again, almost 60 years old at this point when he gets it done. So yeah, he was 50 when he published this book, his most famous book. So if you could see this chart here, this is how he wrote it. So his first book was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, then Prince Caspian, and it goes down here. But what you can see over here, he wrote the first chronological book. Okay, so the first events in Narnia are The Magician's Nephew, but he wrote that book 6. And then you have what happens in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then The Horse and the Boy, and then Prince Caspian, and then The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and then The Silver Chair, and then The Last Battle. So what C.S. Lewis did is he wrote one book, and then he went and created a new world and a new story in different orders of the book of the next publications. So he didn't write them in chronological order, which is normal. A lot of authors do this. A lot of movies do this, right? They'll go back and make what we call a prequel instead of a sequel. They'll go make a movie about events that happened before that. If you're familiar with Star Wars, okay, Star Wars is doing that right now. They're creating new worlds, and the time jumps everywhere, right? I love The Mandalorian, which is a new show right now that is about Grogu or Baby Yoda. And the series is not in chronological order. It happens in, you have to kind of figure out what time period it is in that world. Um, okay, so the Chronicles of Narnia is the children in the book are named Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. So these are the actors that played these kids, and they the sons of Adam and daughters of Eva. And so, if you're familiar at all with the Bible, the first two people that were made in the Bible are Adam and Eve. So that's just a very I think what that does, I think C.S. Lewis is using these children to just represent humanity, people. That's what these children represent. And they face many of the struggles that Christians face every day, or anybody faces every day. Again, this is C.S. Lewis writing what is actually called an allegory. I know that some of you may not know that word. That's okay. Allegory just means it's supposed to reflect or show what happens in real life, right? But it doesn't, it looks different. And we'll talk about what's called symbolism and things that he uses to represent other things. I mentioned it early, his faith, his religion had a very big impact on his writing. And it's not hard to see where that happens. Um, but in the story, the kids they face many of things we have to face, all of us have to face every day, right? Betrayal, greed, fear, and strength, and good things. You know, they do experience a lot of good things. And so that is the overall idea. C.S. Lewis is a teacher, so he's not going to write a book that's just for fantasy. He writes a book that's also teaching people and helping people to um, how to deal with situations in their life, and how to look to the books of Narnia to help them um, better deal with maybe difficult opportunities. Remember, C.S. Lewis's life, it's all related, okay? So you have mother dies at 10 years old, gets to go to college, a war begins and has to go fight in a very, very bad war. And then he gets to go back to college. So C.S. Lewis understands difficulties, and he writes a lot about those difficulties. Um, so let's talk about a few of the books. We're going to go in chronological order and show you kind of what happens in the books. Now, I'm not going to tell you everything because I want you to read them with me, because I want to read them again too with you, because these are really, really well done books. But just a little bit of a synopsis or a little bit of a preview of what the books are about. The Magician's Nephew is the book number one. Remember, it was not written first, but it is the series of events number one. This tells a story of how Narnia was created by Aslan, and of how evil was first introduced to Aslan. Diggory Kirk and his friend Polly traveled to new worlds by the means of Uncle Andrew's magic rings. This is a fun book to read, and it makes sense to read it first. However, it can be more rewarding to read it as a flashback at the end of the series. So some people say read this book first. Some people say read it at the end and then go back to see kind of where it all began. I like to read it first. Your teacher really prefers chronology, which just means I prefer to read things as they happen, not as backstories. Which is what backstory is, a story you read to help you understand what happened back before other stories. And so, but yeah, if you're familiar at all with the Bible, this is very much like the first book of the Bible that is, that we all know about. It's Aslan, and we'll talk about who Aslan is. Aslan is kind of like a god or even a Jesus Christ symbol. and he creates the world, and then we see how evil comes into the world. In Genesis, in the Bible, God creates the world, and Adam and Eve find a way to bring evil into the world. So it's very similar to that, a big impact on his writing. And then we know a little bit more about this one, probably. Um, in this story, four children find their way into Narnia by means of a magic wardrobe. Edmund is a traitor who betrays Aslan and his three siblings. Aslan sacrifices himself on a stone table in order to save Edmund and Narnia. Okay, so this one is very much of a story of basically the New Testament of the Bible, or Jesus's story, right, where he saves people and steps in and takes the punishment for the people. Okay, and so that is a big part of again of this story, and what has helped him to create the whole series. Remember, this is number one. This is the first one. So this first story, he wanted to introduce people to the story of Jesus or the story of Aslan. So it's a really fun story too, because of all of the characters that the children meet as they are living in Narnia. And again, remember, these children live in our world, and they go to Narnia through that wardrobe. And so they are escaping war just like C.S. Lewis did. And then we have a book called Prince Caspian. This is Narnia falls under the rule of men. So at first, Narnia was ruled by Aslan, and then men take over, take the control. So there's talking animals, dwarves, and Aslan are essentially unheard of. So this is like there's no more talking animals. There's no more help from the animal people, animal kingdom. Prince Caspian, with the help of four Provinci children, battle the new Narnians in order to restore old Narnia. So they go back and they try to get back all of the magic of regular Narnia. This is a good book too. So, all right, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. I think these are backwards. This is number 3. Prince Caspian is number 4. Prince Caspian and 3 visitors from England travel into uncharted waters in search of 7 lost lords of Narnia. The Provenzi's cousin, the Provenzi's are these kids, okay? And then they have a cousin. His name is Eustace Claret Scrubb. Is very unpleasant. You can see in this picture, right? He doesn't look like he is enjoying his time there. And so after spending some time as a dragon encounter Aslan, he becomes slightly more bearable. So this is more about bringing someone along with you, helping someone understand and being kind to someone and helping them do better. And then you have the silver chair. This is Eustace and Jill set off for a harrowing search for Caspian's son, Rillian. They encounter giants, Fema fatales, a gloomy mudwiggle, and a talking lion. So a gloomy mudwiggle is just a character that C.S. Lewis created. Femme fatale is basically just a deadly woman. That's all that means. And so this story is very much about helping others. There's a lot of different, again, Christian symbology in this. They do, it's almost has a, if you guys are familiar with the Odyssey and the Iliad, those famous poetry or famous stories, it has a lot of the same things in that. And remember, C.S. Lewis, his background is poetry and old poetry, ancient poetry. And so I think he wrote this book to have a very much of a feel of the Iliad or the Odyssey, where they see giants and they see sirens, which are the women that are singing and making the pirates fall in love, and then they're killing them. And so it has a lot of that too. 1 minute. Sorry to sneeze. I tried to mute it, but I had to sneeze for a second. I apologize for that. Okay. And then The Horse and His Boy. This is a story about the reign of the 4 provinces. So the young children, they go to Narnia, they become leaders in Narnia, and The Mistaken Identity, Haughty Horses, and Foreign Lands. This is an adventure book. This book right here is much more based around just adventure. It's a very what's the word? It's a very easy read. You know, it's a read that you just really enjoy. It's not, there are stressful moments, there are, you know, peaks and valleys, you know, as you read through it, and but for the most part it is just a really interesting book to read without too much drama. And then the last battle, this is the last book of the series, and it depicts the end of Narnia. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to tell you too much because, you know, I want you to read these. I want you to be excited and not know what happens. But I will say this again. Remember, C.S. Lewis's faith and his Christianity affect a lot of his writing. And the end of this book series is very similar to the end of the Bible. So if you ever read the end of the Bible, which is the book of Revelation, it has a lot of the same thing in it as does the last battle. So let's talk a little bit about the symbolism found in his writing. We do hear about Aslan. Aslan is a very important character in his books. He is known for uh-oh. He is known as he's basically based on Jesus or even God. He's kind of both. He gives full life for Edmund, you know, just as Jesus gave his life. The final battle of good and evil is just like the final battle between Jesus and Satan in the Bible. So Aslan is your God figure, your sacrificial figure. And then we have the White Witch. Some of you may have seen this before. This is a great actress. Oh, her name is totally, I can't remember her name, but she was also in the Doctor Strange. If you've seen Doctor Strange, she is a character in there as well, very important character. But the White Witch is based on evil. She is based on Satan in the Bible. Deceiving ways cause Edmund to turn his back on his family for power and a Turkish delight. So she tricks one of the children into betraying the rest of the children, and very much the same way that you see in the Bible, where Satan will trick someone into deceiving others. She imitates Jesus, making Edmund think that she cares for him, but in reality, she only cares about herself. So she is a symbol for Satan or for evil, whichever way you want to put it. Now, Narnia itself is a place, but it's also a character in the book because it's an important part of the series. It is where everything happens for the most part. Some of it happens in the United Kingdom, but for the most part, it all happens in Narnia. The character events that happen in Narnia are based on persons in the Bible that we as Christians are faced with and how we can get through them. Lewis created the series of books to help with the understanding of Jesus. So that's why he wrote it. So Lewis was using this book to help children understand Jesus or the Bible. He wanted to give children a better understanding of the things that he did and how the Bible depicts that he died for them. So that was his motivation behind this. And he used Narnia as a place to show you different characters and different people along the way. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone loves Narnia. Some people criticized C.S. Lewis. As a matter of fact, and we'll talk about his relationship with J.R.R. Tolkien in just a minute, but one of his dear friends, J.R.R. Tolkien, tried to say, do not write children's book. You are an academic. You teach at one of the greatest universities in the world. You are a very sophisticated, very important man who does very important things. Why write a book for children? And so he Tolkien criticized the book because he thought there were too many elements that didn't work. Tolkien, a Father Christmas and an evil witch? Why? Why have both of those people? Talking animals and talking children? Why? Why would you mix those two? Why don't you just have a book about animals or a book about children, not have both talking to each other? But despite the criticisms, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, his first book, really did well. And so he also wrote a couple of books about uh, uh, Christianity in general, just nonfiction, or excuse me, yeah, nonfiction about Christianity. This most popular one is Mere Christianity, a book that's a very basic book about what it is, what is Christianity, what is that religion. I've read this book. It's a really great book if you're curious about anything like that. It is good. Then you have Pilgrim's Regress, The Allegory of Love, The Screw Tape Letters. That's another one. That's almost fiction a little bit. Again, he writes kind of in a new category, not always fiction or nonfiction. Now, his personal life, he had a bit of a strange relationship with Joy. Um, she was a fan of his in the United States. They would write letters to each other. And then she in 1952 she came to meet Mr. Lewis, and a year later she moved to England to live with him with her two children. Now they never planned to get married. That was not what they wanted. But the British Immigration Service said that she could not return to the United Kingdom unless they were married. So they were married, and so I don't fully understand the way that C.S. Lewis writes and talks about joy is unique. It's not the way a man typically talks about his wife. Now, that doesn't mean that he didn't really truly love her. Like, he thought she was amazing. He was saying some really sweet things, but it almost seemed more like a friendship than a marriage. So I don't know. That's what most people say. It's a little, it could be a little confusing. There's actually a movie about it. If you're curious about their relationship, there is a movie. I cannot remember. I think it's something about joy. You could just look up C.S. Lewis uh, life story movie or something, and I'm sure you could find it. I hear it's a good movie. I have not seen it. Okay, so let's go back to the Inklings. So this is one of the cool things about C.S. Lewis's life that I thought was really special. So an Inkling is a person with a vague or half-formed intimations and ideas, plus those who dabble in ink. So as you well know, C.S. Lewis is a brilliant man, very, very intelligent, very smart, but still he says, I'm an inkling, which just means I write about a bunch of things, but I don't really know about everything, right? It's a humble thing to do. It's to say, yes, I am one of the world's most educated persons, but I'm also just I don't really know everything about what I'm saying, right? Things like that. And so that's what they do. The Inklings were Tolkien, Warren, and Lewis. Tolkien, if you don't know, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings books. And so C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia, and J.R.R. Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings authors, were very close friends. And they would. Warren was another professor that taught there. They they were all just really brilliant men. Now, this picture here is a real pub or a bar in England that is still there today, where they would meet and they would smoke and drink beer and talk about uh, whatever, talk about teaching, talk about writing, talk about their books, lots of different things they would discuss. And so now in a letter from Lewis, C.S. Lewis wrote about J.R. Tolkien, who is another person that we should all know who is. He says, no one ever influenced Tolkien. We listened to his work, but could affect it only by encouragement. He has only two reactions to criticism. Either he begins the whole work again or else takes not notice at all. So he's saying that if we ever give him advice about writing, he'll throw it away and do it again, or he won't listen to us. And so that's an interesting thing about J.R. Tolkien, which I understand because his books are phenomenal. Some of the greatest writing there is. And then now we're in a time period where World War II starts to really affect his life and the people around him. And so these schoolgirls were sent to the kilns, right, for the bombing, to his home in the countryside, to where they could be safe. And so let me see. Yeah. So that is where it began, right? That is where he starts to get the idea of writing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe during World War II, because he has children that are there that are interested in his home and the wardrobe in his home. Um, Jack eventually joins the Home Guard, which basically the Home Guard means you kind of join the military, but you don't go to war. You stay home and you help with things at home. Now, remember, this is 1939. He is, over almost, he's like 41 years old. And so he's not really of the age to go fight, but he is, able to help at home. Some just interesting things about C.S. Lewis. He is only had one joint in each of his two thumbs, and that's just very odd. His thumbs only had one joint, so if you could see my thumb, I bend it very freely. He could not. His thumb would have not bend the way that ours does. Now, why does that matter? Well, obviously, writing is difficult, right? Lots of things are difficult when your thumbs don't work quite as well. He had a great memory. One of his great legacies is his memory, is his ability to memorize books. He said that he would memorize a book so that he would not have to buy the book. So he was a very frugal or thrifty person. He did not spend a lot of money. Um, he also, this is an interesting thing, he liked to read while walking around. And so there are stories of him running into trees as he's reading, because he's really in the book, and then he runs into a tree as he's walking around. And then he does smoke. He was a big smoker. He smoked when he was a teenager, and then he continued to smoke for the rest of his life. And then he never learned to drive a car. Now, remember, he was born in a time where cars were very rare. And as he grew older, he probably didn't use a lot of cars, only rarely. And then by the time cars were more popular, he didn't need to drive because people would drive for him. And then finally, Lewis wasn't a traveler. He claimed that going to a place he loved to imagine would only spoil the wonder and the mystery. And so I can understand that. I've been to places around the world that were exciting places, and when I get there, I did not like them very much. So this is something to think about. But still, go travel. You should always travel, because the truth is most places are fun to see. So I think that's all of our time. I do think we're kind of running late. But if you do have any questions about this series, or I do want to tell you that I'm doing a winter program where we can read these books together. I will let you choose which one you want to read. If you want to start with number one and read through them, if we have time, we could do that, or at least get started. Or if you just want to read his famous one, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe together, that is totally okay. Whatever you like and prefer. But before we can open up to some questions, if anyone has any.
Hi.
Hi, Brandon.
I want to ask one question about which book of the Narnia's book is your favorite?
Very good question. I like classics, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is one of the classics, and I think that it deals with the story is more complete. I would say that when he writes the other stories, he's doing that to fill in some background, or maybe to create more drama moving forward. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is a great book to read because it has a beginning, end, and the middle. Excuse me, beginning, middle, and end. And I think that the story is just really beautiful. And so I like the classics. I like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as my favorite.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Thank you for your question, Brandon.
Well, there's no question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you guys. Hey, listen, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I really, I feel like I should thank you because talking about one of my favorite authors is always fun. And I hope to see some of you again in the future. So have a great night, and I will start my day. Bye bye.